Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Surviving UX podcast, where we will never have a headcount reduction, but we sure know what it's like to go through one. I'm your host, Meg Kramer, and with me is Jessamyn Edwards. Today, we have another guest joining us, but first, I thought we could chat a little bit about layoffs. There was a kind of one that made the news recently. Jessamyn, did you hear about the Netflix layoffs?
I was just reading about it. I didn't know much about it. It looks like they laid off about 150 people from Netflix, about 2% of their workforce.
When I first heard 150 people, I thought, and this is like a testament to how jaded I am, I thought, that's not that many people.
I know. And I just
Terrible.
think for me, it's a shock because I think of Netflix as being one of those like rock solid companies that has only ever grown, and that this must be a shock culturally for them, that they think that, you know, all these years that they're just like this perfect invincible company. And it just goes to show you in tech that like trends change, times change, and no company is ever like set, you know, as much as they might want to think they are.
Right. It's like, it kind of reminds me of like how popular and prominent Kodak was. You would probably at times like would have never thought that they would have ever gone away. And I feel that way about, you feel that way about Netflix. And I think that it's interesting to see that their jerk reaction to their not doing, as well financially, and their stock prices, et cetera, like that this was their reaction, because it is the reaction of a lot of companies. And I've been through this before too, is like, oh, we're just gonna try to fix this by messing up a bunch of people's lives. And with in the shroud of like, well, we weren't performing optimally, or we weren't structured the right way. And it's just like, yeah, you maybe weren't structured the right way, but do you know how much damage you're doing by restructuring everything? Restructuring everything in such a dramatic fashion. It's going to take months, years, possibly, for productivity to kind of loop back around and get back. And
they might pay a price when it comes to like reputation. I mean, you think about, if you're trying to attract some talent in a quarter or two, people might be hesitant to apply. Recently on LinkedIn, I saw people have been posting these letters from a company where they had gotten a job offer and then it was rescinded. I don't know if you've seen some of those. But
so depressing.
Oh man, could you imagine? You're like, hey, I'm all set. I got my job lined up. Sweet. And it's some, big company. And then you get a letter saying, oops, sorry about that. And you just think, God, how much time they probably spent interviewing and, and that was invested in that process of kind of getting them onboarded and giving them an offer. And like, because interviews can take months of time.
This is exactly my story. My very first job out of the gate. Now I was hired and they moved me out and I started, but a month later, I was part of a round of layoffs. They paid for me to move my whole life from one city to another city, and then laid me off like a month later.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So anyway, we can
brutal.
get into that story another time, perhaps, because I don't think I've ever talked in depth about it on the podcast. But we want to pull in our guest here because he may have some thoughts on layoffs as well. Today we are joined by Jim Kalbach. He's the chief evangelist at MURAL, which is a very interesting title. Among other things, he's written 3 great books for UX practitioners, and I particularly like mapping experiences. And I keep a copy very close to the desk that I am at currently, just in case I need a great example of how we think about visualizing the lived experience. And his latest book is the Jobs to Be Done Playbook. And he also co-founded the Jobs to Be Done Toolkit website, which you might want to check out. He's been a guest and host on many UX and product podcasts. So Jessamyn and I hope to learn a thing or two today from him. Welcome, Jim, to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Meg and Jessamyn. Great to be here.
Hey, welcome. Well, Jim, why don't we kick it off with a couple quick questions for you, but first, I actually want to hear your hot take on the Netflix layoffs. What did you think about reading that news? Did it evoke any memories, or did it rub you the wrong way, or were you concerned at all, or what did you feel when you saw that?
Yeah, well, I was concerned. I did, by the way, have a reaction like Meg. It was like, oh, it's not that many, which is a sign of how just kind of accustomed we've become to layoffs, right? But when I hear about any layoffs, they're usually couched as we had no choice. Right. But
Yeah.
always some management stake behind it, usually in the name of over aggressive and over rapid growth for shareholders previously. So there's some miscalculation. There was a trajectory that they set themselves on, and it was wrong then, and now they're catching up to their own mistake. But you never hear, "Hey, we made a mistake," you know. So, and you know, we had no. It's just shrugging your shoulders, saying we have no choice, and then, you know, kind of like we just said, the rest of the world just accepts it. It has to be this way. And I don't know. I think there's a more systemic issue there that kind of irks me when I hear about those things.
Yeah. It's like, we had no choice, but our jobs are still safe. We just, you know, we're going to cut these people that we'll never, you know, have to kind of deal with. But in terms of your current role, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be, you know, in this sort of design throne that you're in right now as a chief evangelist? I'm very curious about it.
Sure. Well, it's actually not. It's not a design role that I have here. I kind of got away from the day-to-day practice of design coming to MURAL over 7 years ago. But I work with a lot of design teams, and it's really interesting perspective that I have working with customers and people around the globe, and kind of having more of a helicopter view on the field of UX. So as chief evangelist, though, that's a role I've had for about 2 years here at MURAL now. I'm basically a face of the company, talking not only about our product, but about, you know, what we offer and what the real change or the benefit of MURAL is, and how that impacts your team and your company and collaboration in general. And I go around and do podcasts. So happy to be here on your podcast, but also webinars and all kinds of other events. I work with analysts. I work with our best customers. So I get around as chief evangelist. I get around kind of, you know, as the title suggests, advocating for what we're all about here at MURAL.
Sounds very nifty. You like the analogy to a helicopter is interesting for the looking at the design teams. Are you familiar with the term like helicopter parent? Do you feel like you're a helicopter parent to these design teams?
No,
do they feel that way for you?
No, not really. Maybe a better analogy is a drone, because I'm more like an observer. So I'm just kind of like spying on these teams. You know, I usually have a mission or purpose when I engage with a UX team or an innovation team. We service lots of different types of teams, but they're very often creative teams of some kind. And, you know, I'll go out and fix a problem or talk about MURAL or talk about our new category of collaborative intelligence. But while I'm doing that, and this is actually my background as a UX designer and observer of human behavior, I'm observing their human behavior as I'm doing this as well too. And I kind of make those mental notes, and you kind of see a picture from a drone's eye view.
So it's part design ops. Sounds like a little bit like you're kind of observing how your design teams are working and interacting, and doing some optimization, or at least suggesting how things could be carried out.
Design teams. I work with a lot of designs op people as well too, but I'm also working with sales teams and customer success teams. There's all kinds of teams where, you know, creativity and imagination play a role in their work as well.
Very cool. Well, Jessamyn and I often talk about how we don't know exactly like what's next. And, you know, when you hit a certain point in your design career, there's maybe more of a plateau. And there's not kind of an obvious next step. So do you have any kind of like recommendations or any inspiration for people who are kind of stuck in the middle, seeing as how it feels a little bit like you've kind of hit some sort of great, great role here?
Yeah. For me, yes, I spent a lot of time as a UX designer in the quote unquote UX design trenches. But for me, there was kind of an underlying or maybe overarching is a better word, kind of set of skills that I was developing. One of those, observing human behavior, but creativity, imagination in general, that were really my interest. Like I wasn't necessarily attached to UX design per se as a field. I was also interested in human factors and innovation and adoption of innovations and lots of other things at the same time. But I would say it was the practice of UX design that gave me the skills and the confidence to apply those ways of thinking, a designerly way of thinking about problem solving, to other spaces. So for instance, when I came to MURAL 7 years ago or shortly thereafter, I founded and then ended up running our customer success team. And you might say, yeah, but what does UX design have to do with customer success? And if you look at it as we're creating a human experience, right? I saw it as creating an experience for our customers. I was just using a very, very different medium. Instead of product requirements and wireframes and shipping code and usability testing, I was writing emails and sending campaigns and visiting people on site. But it was still about observing the human behavior and creating an experience for them. So I guess my biggest advice is, I think designers and UX designers, they have a set of skills that are going to be more and more relevant for the future in all kinds of fields. And if you're looking to move to the side or above or whichever direction you want to move, think about how you can leverage those skills in other contexts.
That's super interesting, because I think about when I interact with my daughter's school system, for example, and I'm, navigating their website or their little apps that they have for parents. And I think, God, somebody's putting all this together. There's so much technology here. And it's being run by, school administrators who are not in tech and probably did not get into school administration because they're lovers of tech. And yet, they're sort of providing all of these tech moments for everyone else, and we're relying on them together, but they probably don't have PMs or engineers or anybody like that to help run these shows. They're just consuming this stuff and then using it. And then, millions of families are relying on it. It kind of blows my mind sometimes. And I think if they had someone like a UX designer or somebody that was from the tech world to come into that environment and try to, map a journey or write up user stories or things like that, if it would blow their mind or if it would just be, I don't know, like a useless exercise. Because I think that tech has its own culture. And when you're out of it and you're in the rest of the world, the real world, like it's very interesting to see how people react to things or respond to things, like, or get fumbled by things that in tech you'd be like, well, just cut that as a requirement, just keep moving forward and get it done. But then in like, I'm trying to think of a case, but like, apps, like, for example, one of the biggest things that I notice with my daughter's school is that they have a calendar that nobody updates. But what they do is they publish a PDF. So somebody makes an actual calendar, puts it in a PDF and posts it to the website in some very hidden location. And then the actual calendar app that's front and center on their website never, ever gets used. It's blank. And it's one of those things where you're just like, man, someone needs to tap somebody on the shoulder over there and just say, hey, did you notice that you actually have a calendar here? But it's just, people are used to whatever they've been doing for 20 years or something. That's how they're doing it. And I think like, if you're just thinking about, you know, as an evangelist, you're going out into the world, and not everybody's going to come to the table with the tech culture or the tech experience. They're just trying to get their job done and their life done. And how do you kind of bring them in or whatever to a tech vision to say like, hey, this technology is really going to help you?
Totally. There are a lot of, I don't want to say bad experiences, because that kind of points the finger, you know, wrongly, but just haphazard, or not cared for, or nobody's paying attention to those experiences. So I'll yes and that point, and even suggest that it goes beyond tech. That I think we have a skill set that can be applied to general problem solving, whether it's, you know, civic or for your local government or beyond. Or for example, I did an interesting project that I wrote about in the second edition of Mapping Experiences, where I was asked to facilitate a workshop, an experience mapping workshop, with former violent extremists, to look at how a nonprofit organization could better fight violent extremism. And it had nothing to do with tech, but it had everything to do with observing the human experience, mapping it out, engaging in fair and inclusive design thinking methods where everybody gets a chance to put their ideas up on the board, and clustering, and, you know, basically all the things that we do and learn as UX designers, applying it in a completely different non-tech context. And that was eye-opening for people, and they had never experienced anything like that before. Just the idea of having the structured way of understanding experiences. And essentially, I did experience mapping with this group, and it was new and fresh for them.
That's cool. And yeah, go ahead, Meg.
I was just going to say, it begs the question for me then, though, if it's like our professional paid job to be in these spaces, like schools and nonprofits and government, and helping the environment and things like that with these skills. Is there space for us to have professional lives there, or is it purely kind of like our service, like our side service, like, Jessamyn, you're being involved in your daughter's school, or Jim, the example you just gave, that I don't know if that was, your full-time paid job. And I've kind of encountered this too, with like thinking through like ways to be on boards of nonprofits and things like that, and like what can somebody in tech bring. And I think all of these things totally and completely apply, because you bring this mindset that a lot of people don't necessarily have. They have a lot of the expertise in like the area that they're trying to serve, the populations they're trying to serve, or the issue that they're trying to help with. But you bring this other kind of like way of thinking about things, and way of implementing things that like could streamline or shortcut or get people to use that calendar. And I guess it's so it begs the question for me is like, would those places ever have paid professional jobs, or is it how we are using these skills to be of service on the side?
But from my drone eye view of the world that I have now, I'm actually seeing that more and more. Working with government institutions that have design thinking teams. Even my local government here in Jersey City, New Jersey, where I live, they got a grant from the Bloomberg Foundation, and they have an innovation team. And I went and visited them. And on the walls were empathy maps and journey maps and personas that they were doing on, the citizens and residents of Jersey City to help make their lives better. And so that was a team of paid people. And I think more and more I'm starting to see that things like design thinking, innovation, mapping, experience mapping, and journey mapping, starting to be things that folks are asking for, not only in tech, but also in government, in education. That's a whole nother area too. You start to see universities that have creative teams, not to work on the university website, but to rethink what is the future of a university?
An actual experience,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Or libraries, like what is the future of libraries? And guess what? They're starting to turn to the skills that we have, and then formalizing that in paid roles, Meg, to answer your question. So yeah, it might be a volunteer thing. And the example that I gave, I did pro bono. I actually didn't get any money for it. I just thought it was cool and I wanted to do it, to have a life experience. And it was something worthy of including in my book, right? So I did that for that reason, but I think more and more you're starting to see that as small departments, paid roles. They're reaching out to consultants to do that kind of work for them.
Well, hopefully this all means we'll have some sort of job security going forward.
Well, and that's the thing, you guys, is that, I mean, we have like a lot of grand vision about how design processes should look. But the reality is, a lot of times when you get onto a team, that they don't want a lot of that to happen. They don't care about it. They don't want to map a journey or flesh out a persona or do a ton of in-depth interviews or whatever. They don't
have
care.
Any sort of evidence that a human uses what currently exists.
Right. I mean, I think that like, that's why I sort of wonder about, Jim, what you're talking about with like working with a nonprofit or as a government or a school or something like that, where it's not about the tech at the end of the day. Right. The tech is a tool, but it's not necessarily like what they're focused on. They're focused on some other metric or some other experience, for that person. That's what counts. And that's what they're measuring. It's not necessarily how many people downloaded something. So I think like those design skills that a lot of designers spend years and a lot of money to learn to do don't always get used or pushed, or, those muscles don't get flexed as much when you're, in a typical UX design role at a tech company.
Yeah. I mean, we've been doing this for a while now, all of us here, right? And it's always surprising to me how many organizations didn't get the memo yet, that they're not the center of the world, that it's all about the customer and the user kind of thing. So even though a lot of what we've done and studied and talk about seems very familiar to us, it's unfamiliar to others, and there might even be a resistance still out there. And I've run into it as well too, right? A lack of a willingness. I don't know. I think that's an old-fashioned or a kind of a dinosaur perspective, and I just tend to kind of just move around that. Obviously there's a little bit of persuasion you want to do, but at some point in time, just let that be the rock in the stream, and the stream's going to go around them eventually, and then eventually cover up the rock. So I don't fret about those naysayers and the roadblocks. Of course, if the organization itself is unwilling or a roadblock itself to having proper UX design and customer experience, yet they have the UX team, that's when it gets really frustrating. When UX is kind of used as a checkbox. It's like, oh, I got to get me some of this UX thing. And can I have a side of fries with that? It's kind of like, nah, it's not the way it works. The way that I like to sum that up is that UX is not it's not a diet pill. It's a lifestyle change that people want to, hey, I'm overweight, I'll just take a diet pills. And no, you got to change your lifestyle. And they don't want to hear that, right? They just want UX to be the diet pill and not the lifestyle change. And those organizations, I think, are just going to start fading out, to be honest with you.
So I want to skip ahead to a question that I have for you that's related. So in all of these kind of things that you're talking about with like experience mapping and that kind of stuff, obviously one framework to use is jobs to be done, which you are a huge champion of, and in some ways like a very prominent person in the jobs to be done kind of world of evangelizing how to do this and helping people figure it out. And you also mentioned that a lot of places like don't haven't heard of these kinds of things before. And so this is new to them. So my question is, in Jobs to Be Done, for anybody who has been doing that stuff, I feel like we always hear about the drill story, about hiring the drill to make the hole. Hiring, that you're not buying a drill, you're hiring something to make the hole. And then the milkshake story, the one about how, I think it was McDonald's, how they were wondering why people were buying milkshakes in the morning. So first of all, are you tired of these? Are these stories tired? And is there anything new that you're using that like really captures people's imagination?
Yeah. I'm a little tired of those two stories, particularly the milkshake story, because it's actually not a good example of Jobs to Be Done. Ironically. So, but
why is
I
that?
actually,
what's the reason behind that?
I mean, it's based on an apocryphal research that actually had no effect anyway. And the way that it's framed, it's really not that. I mean, the job isn't to have something to do while you're commuting. I mean, I would frame it differently. I think the punch. So you set up the story, and then the punchline doesn't lay, in my opinion. I would frame it differently.
For those of us who don't know the milkshake story, could you give us a quick version?
Yeah, sure. So there is this research team that was trying to understand. It was McDonald's. They often try to cover that name, but they were doing research for McDonald's and trying to increase milkshake sales. And they went out and observed people in a parking lot of a McDonald's, and were asking them and then watching them buy milkshakes. And one thing that they found, recording notes and basically doing some observation / ethnographic stuff, and They found that a large majority of people, or there seemed to be a type of person that was buying milkshakes in the morning, and that was a little bit surprising. And then they found that it was a format, and it had a certain properties that made it something that filled you up while you were on your commute. So there's this milkshake story that it's not the job to be done isn't to buy a milkshake, it's to have something to eat, quote unquote, eat during
that like lasts a long time.
It lasts a long time
because like they had these long commutes, and like
it doesn't make crumbs, and it has the straw, and you can put it right in your cup, in car holder. The cup holder in the car and things like that. Of course, it's very American too. If you go tell that story outside of America, people are like, "What? You drive to work? You take the train?" Don't go to Paris and tell this story, or in any other European or world
interesting.
City.
But I think Starbucks, half of what Starbucks sells is those coffee milkshakes, right? I mean, people aren't there to buy drip.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, there's a lot of problems with the milkshake story, but it's used as a kind of a gateway. It's kind of the gateway into Jobs to Be Done thinking. It's used that way.
I thought you meant like into the rest of the menu.
No, into Jobs to Be Done, as well as the drill story, which is people don't want to drill, they want a hole in the wall, which I actually use that quote, and sometimes I'll even start my presentations on Jobs to Be Done with that quote, which came from Theodore Levitt, who actually never practiced or even used the term job to be done, but he is known for having said that, or told his MBA students, people don't want to drill, they want a hole in the wall. And it's really just the essence of that quote that I grab onto, which is, it's not about the product or the means, it's about the outcome that people want. And if you focus on that, you might find new opportunities for innovation and growth. So that I just use that story as it's kind of just an intro, and I'll even preface it with, hey, you've probably heard this before, but I just want to use it as a launch pad into my Jobs to Be Done talk.
I gotta be honest with you guys, the idea of hanging out in a McDonald's parking lot and tapping on windows and chatting with people about what they're ordering and why sounds very appealing to me. I think I could see myself doing that for a few hours.
Designer. Yeah, because that's the thinking that you have. Yeah, you're observing the human condition anywhere you go in the world, right?
Exactly. So are there any good news stories, better ones than those?
Yes, that's interesting you asked me that, because I was asked to do a little interview video thing, and they said, yeah, we want a story, but we want a new one. What do you have? And I didn't have anything. So unfortunately, I have a big fat goose egg for you to answer with, Meg. I don't have anything. I have a lot of case studies. I mean, there's examples in the book, projects. I think you were involved in some of those, Meg, when we worked together, that are nice and compact. But I don't have a story package like that, and I think I need one.
Yeah, maybe fodder for the next book.
There you go.
Well, we're gonna run out of time here. Jessamyn, did you have any questions for Jim before we get to the rapid fire questions?
Here's my biggest question, Jim, is around, the process of writing a book, which I think I've heard people say is just like excruciating and long and way worse than they thought it was going to be. I mean, now you've written 3. I mean, what is your secret to getting through that process?
Yeah, it is like pulling teeth for me, and I don't like it. So the fact that I wrote 3, there's something, what is it, masochistic or sadistic about it? I don't know which one, but there is a little bit of self-torture there. However, having done it a couple times, I know what to expect, and having a little bit of foresight as to what the middle, particularly the middle, is like, and the end as well too. I feel like I can move through it a little bit quicker without so much pain. But interesting that you volunteered me to write another book there, Meg, in between sentences, because I don't have any desire to write another book. And you until the scars heal over from the last one, basically.
If you could give some advice to any of our listeners who maybe have an idea but have never pursued it, what would you tell them?
I see, particularly on the last book, but even on the Jobs to Be Done book, but on Mapping Experiences also, I preceded that with a lot of workshopping. Like comedians will go to the local comedy club and do new material before they get on stage on their HBO special and things like that. And what I did was I whipped up some workshops on the topic. So what I did was I learned myself how to talk about those topics, but I also heard the questions that people had and was thinking about how do I structure an approach, a book length approach to the topic at hand, Jobs to Be Done or Mapping Experience. How do I create a book length structure around that and answer all of the questions in a logical way that I'm confident will land? And I got that confidence by actually going out and doing a lot of work well ahead of it. I mean, I workshopped Jobs to Be Done 4 or 5 years before I thought I was ready to write a book on it. And what that did was not only give me confidence, I had material. Like I had some blog posts and I had, things that I had laying around. So one of the first things I did was just kind of reconstitute editing room floor clippings that I had and kind of put it all back together as a kind of a first step. But then you have the grueling middle part, that helped, but you still have this grueling middle part of writing a book. The problem with writing a book is not necessarily having the knowledge. It's you have to sit down and write like every day for a year. So there's a wherewithal quality that you need to bring to writing a book.
Wow. Amazing. Thanks, Jim.
Got to be ready for those scars and the teeth pulling, I guess, if you really want to do it. Yeah. Well, Jim, we like to close out with our guests with some fun questions off the top of your head. We, lots of people talk about apps or experiences that they love, but what one is one that you can tolerate? What's an app or experience out there that you're using that isn't the worst?
That isn't the worst. So wait, it's
yes.
not the one. It's not one that I love, but it's just.
Well, here's an example of mine. I actually don't mind my chart, which is my EMR, my electronic medical record. I don't mind it. I have to use it, but you know what? It isn't the worst. It's great that I can message my doctor.
Right. Yeah. I'm less and less annoyed by the little usability things, although I see all of them. I'm trying to think of an app that kind of stood out to me recently. I think I use Zillow a lot just to kind of Zillow surf. I don't know if that's a word. Just like I would just buy a house. I don't actually want to buy a house. But it doesn't suck.
Yeah, got it. Okay, and the next one is a funny or fancy word or concept that somebody from outside our field would just think is something they would definitely have to dig at to learn more about.
Yeah, there's a lot of them there, isn't there? Yeah, I mean, we mentioned ethnography can be, like, what are you guys talking about with that? Interestingly enough, I think the term journey mapping and experience mapping has kind of become commonplace, even amongst stakeholders, and things like that. So it's interesting how these terms first are kind of insight or jargony things, but then they do become commonplace, right? So I used to say journey map, but I don't say that anymore because now everybody knows what they are.
Which is great. That's great.
I think I think so.
Because this podcast is all about surviving our UX careers, what are you keeping in mind for the next week ahead so that you can survive? What's one do and one don't that you're keeping in mind for the next week ahead?
For the next week ahead, I mean, we have a stand-up now that's forcing me to kind of prioritize my week ahead, and I think just, you had Zoom fatigue and everybody's so crazy at work. I think, just don't be so crazy at work. And one do would be to kind of be a little bit more deliberate and mindful about your work week, and do that and do some pre-thought and post-thought, so pre-work and then reflection.
Well, that's actually, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to go at the don't, move over to the don't. I mean, I deal a lot with the teams and how they collaborate right now. So it would be don't think that everything has to be a synchronous meeting, and think about async a little bit more. The common joke, this meeting really could have been an email. I think it's bigger than just an email. It's what can you do async, and it's amazing what teams can do asynchronously.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Jim, thank you so very much. We are going to run out of time here. Thank you so much for all of your insights, and for joining us today.
My
Jessamyn?
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. It was awesome to talk to you. Best of luck with promoting your latest book and your evangelism. For listeners, do you need any advice or just some sympathy for your UX career? Write to us at survivingux@gmail.com. See you next time.
See ya. Surviving UX is hosted and edited by Jessamyn Edwards and Meg Kramer. Our theme music is, among other things, the on-hold music for Cisco phones, Opus No. 1 by Tim Carlton and Derek Deal. Our thanks to Jim Kalbach, who had to return to running his drones. But we will be back and hope to have you tune in to the next episode of Surviving UX.